share PowerPoint. Cool.
Hello, welcome everybody. We're going to start in about a couple of minutes. Are we enabling people to join? Welcome everybody to our weekly webinar. Today we are going to talk about blockchain and the state of the industry. It's a very exciting time for blockchain and for Edge in particular. We're gonna have a conference around that at the end of the year that you're all welcome to participate. Before getting into the subject, and we have today Kyle Ellicott. Kyle is one of the founder of Tokyo Networks and Read-Write Labs. We've been together for the last 4 years, looking at those space around mobility and blockchain and edge computing. And I just wanted to. So Kyle, there is one person asking if the sound is on. Can you hear me?
I can hear you loud and clear. Can everyone hear me okay?
Yes, I can hear you.
Yep. Sound check.
Yeah.
Thank you, Jacob.
Thank you, Jacob. Awesome.
Mic check 1, 2. We're good.
All right. So the first thing I wanted to say is wish Kyle a happy birthday. Kyle is like what, you're 21 now, or
21 a few times over. Thank you very much.
So let's go very quickly to the content, right? So as you probably all know by now, we're Tokyo. We are very focused on formation of markets and development of companies in that context. We create communities and content around those emerging trends, and we do that through data, events, and expertise and experts. We are focused on technology wave, right? And technology wave, we are helping you understand those technology wave. And as wave comes to the beach and start being implemented in the enterprise, there are some factors that basically make either a wave a big wave or a small wave. And what we want to do is we want to make sure that we tell you what type of wave you're going to see and how those waves are going to evolve over time based on the use case that you're targeting, the technology, and the industry you're in. And so what we do is we identify relevant emerging trends, right? We map the timing, we map the touch points and the opportunities for each use case and each verticals. We create the industry landscapes. We create content around those landscapes, and we develop communities, and we enable companies and experts to talk to this community and contribute content. And so next slide. The content that we provide, right? So you're kind of in the water trying to find the right wave, and the content we provide to enable you to do that is we have an AI platform that we've developed over the course of the last 3 years in partnership with several major universities. and we provide you with the content through the platform, and the platform is called topionetworks.com. And then we send you newsletter, monthly briefing, quarterly updates. We do those state of the industries of master classes. We do white paper briefings, and then we're starting to do online, offline events as well. The first big one being Edge Computing World in December. And if you look at the history of the company, we started in 2015 with a community of 60,000 people around wearables. Then we built it, we kind of expanded it to IoT. And now we have a community of about 400,000 people around IoT. And in 2019, we're going to this next wave of technologies that is going to make IoT and wearable a reality, called edge computing. And we have now about 180,000 people talking to us about those opportunities. And so one last slide, I think. Yeah, just not forget about this slide. Let's go next, Kyle.
All right.
So I'm pleased to introduce you to Kyle Ellicott. Kyle is the founder of Topio Network together with me, and somebody who has been tracking landscape and the ecosystem of landscape for the last 4 or 5 years now. So.
Thank you very much, Philippe. It's been an honor. I'm excited to share with you guys, with everyone today, what we've been doing on the blockchain and distributed ledgers landscape over the past quarter.
Sorry, Kyle, to interrupt you. One last thing is, if you want to ask questions, you can ask questions whenever you want. And there are 2 types of questions. One question, which is clarifying question on what Kyle is talking about. I'll ask the question right away because it's going to be of interest to everybody. If it's a question which is not relevant to what Kyle is talking about, we'll ask at the Q&A session at the end of the presentation. And you can either ask questions through chat or through the Q&A button, which is right, I think, under at the middle of your screen.
Perfect. And I was just about to say the exact same thing, and we already have our first question. Hopefully we've been clear on everything we've said thus far. If not, we're going to have a fun ride ahead of us. But first and foremost, in addition to what Philippe said, a big thank you to Philippe and our entire team around the world who have helped in efforts of this research and putting this landscape together. It takes a lot of time, not just from myself, but from the entire team, and I couldn't have done it without them. So thank you guys very much for those who are able to tune in. But today, I'm excited to present the 3rd version, or the Q3 2019 edition of our blockchain landscape. And through today's webinar, I'm going to break it into 3 areas. We're going to jump into the overarching landscape and do a deep dive into what's been happening over the past quarter and almost up until about yesterday, last night. Sorry. And then we're going to jump into emerging trends and opportunity areas, followed by Q&A for anything, as Philippe mentioned, that may have not been answered otherwise. I've started off this same presentation the same way for the past 3 editions, as we did one in between the last 2, but I thought it was relevant to say today. However, we are going to blend these worlds a little bit as the landscape itself has started to blend. And so first and foremost, I'd like to kick it off and say blockchain is not Bitcoin and blockchain is not crypto. Sometimes those have gotten confused.
Hey, Kyle, I have this question from Dean telling me, so is blockchain a distributed ledger?
Yes, yes, that's a great question, Dean. Yes, it's a great question. You know, blockchain is an open and distributed ledger that can record transactions between 2 parties in a verified or permanent way. That's, I believe, the Wikipedia definition that we've had saved around that. So great question. And now that the landscape has really evolved over 2019, we're starting to see new versions of cryptocurrencies or tokens enter the blockchain landscape. So we're not going to talk about any kind of speculation. We're not going to talk about pricing. We're going to talk about the infrastructure and how that has become a part of this distributed ledger landscape as well. And I know that a ton of things have happened already this morning in the industry. Please know that when we build these landscapes, at some point we have to put a pin in the process to be able to put it all together. So there may be some pieces, some news, or some companies that may have not made this version that will be a part of the next version as they've just come out recently. Just earlier this week, Gartner released their hype cycle for blockchain, which I thought was timely for our presentation today. And I thought it was also relevant to kind of show off to everybody here, as blockchain has been talked a lot about this year in 2019 as a buzzword. Companies have raised money off of it. Companies have launched projects off of it. The parent company, I believe, Lipton Iced Tea, renamed themselves after it. So blockchain in some respects has reached what some refer to as hype. But that's just the term itself. The actual underlying technology, the infrastructure, and what we're going to talk about today is still very much in the real and very much playing out over the next 5, 10 plus years. And Gartner supports this as well, as they are showing the hype cycle of where things are today. And towards the bottom of the cycle, you're seeing ICOs and cryptocurrencies and distributed ledgers, stuff that we have been working on or have been talking about since as early as 2014 in some cases, and earlier than that as well. And what you'll notice is the innovation trigger, what's coming in the next 5 to 10 years is pretty much blockchain in every single industry you could possibly imagine. Where we have witnessed this, we've been talking to people, the companies we're going to be seeing today are showing this, where they're either just getting started, and these are emerging markets and industries, or they're starting to harden up in terms of their use cases as well. Also on the distributed ledger side, Dean, back to your question, I wanted to point this out. We do see blockchain and distributed ledgers towards the bottom half of this, in the trough of disillusionment. And one thing that's fascinating is the fact that, in Gartner's model here, it says that its plateau will be reached in less than 2 years, which also goes to a lot of the conversation that has been happening around the year 2021. And the idea of a lot of the implementations of today in enterprise may have to be redone due to the massive progression of technology and infrastructure improvements, along with some conversations early on about standardization around the industry as well. So wanted to show that to everybody. We're going to dive into each and every bit of this as well over the course of today. So without further ado, welcome to the blockchain landscape. Here is the latest version. You will be able to download this later today on topionetworks.com. So don't fear if you need to take a screenshot, there'll be high-res versions available for you, if not today, by the end of the week. So the overall blockchain landscape itself right now has over 1,000 companies listed into it. That's about 730 unique companies between both the industry landscape and the ecosystem. The ecosystem breaks down into venture capital, accelerators, incubators, consortiums, more of the, again, general ecosystem. What we're going to be talking and focusing a lot on today is the industry and the infrastructure. That landscape is almost 600 companies, which is up from, I believe, 490 companies. So we've seen about 100 plus company boost from last quarter, Q2, to this quarter here in Q3 as well. Funding wise, we've also seen quite a bit of a boost. We went from 18 billion in the last quarter to now seeing 16.6 and rising $billion that has been invested in this industry and the companies within the landscape. And over 16 billion of that has been invested since 2017 alone, which we'll dive into deeper here. So thanks to Philippe for showing me a very unique Excel trick yesterday. We were able to gather a lot of this data. Maybe not my perfect skill set with PowerPoint here, but nonetheless, this is the landscape, the investment landscape from 2010 to 2019. So the companies that represent this landscape, the almost 600, this is what the funding landscape has looked like over almost the past 10 years. And you can see that from about 2010 to 2014, we were pretty consistent with a small boost going into 2015, a drop in 2016, and then a surge in the past 3 years. And a lot of that came after the forever known crypto winter, along with really a lot more focus around the potential of blockchain and a lot of implementations, pilot programs, and focus again around the technology and not so much speculation as to what cryptocurrency or what the technology itself could be. So for those who are just new to this industry, think of 2016 and 2017 was the year where blockchain really started to stand on its own and was no longer associated directly with cryptocurrency. Hence the slide when we first started. And here in 2019, we're looking at about 1.2 billion as we trail into the end of the year. So breaking down this landscape a little bit further. So starting in the upper left, is our consumer. Now this landscape breaks down consumer, enterprise, and infrastructure. And in the consumer landscape, we've seen a rise in companies as well in a few new categories. Right now we're sitting just over 230 companies. Primarily what has been dominant is payments and banking, along with devices and wallets. However, in this quarter, we've started to see a lot of traction gained around gaming and gambling, and new markets entering in around non-fungible tokens, insurance, decentralized finance or DeFi, and health as well. Some major news that has come in this area of the landscape was the New York Times earlier this summer mentioned their implementation of blockchain to help fight against fake news, which they are not the only ones. They just happen to be a very big brand getting into this space. And then the little bit down further in the gaming sector, we've seen a massive surge of not just companies, but also funding and focus along with partnerships this last quarter. Immutable, which is right down here, right down here, has actually just received about 15 million in a Series A funding to focus on building out blockchain games. Miller Lite also just had a major partnership with a few of the companies in that space. Dapper Labs, who we're going to talk a lot about today, has been built in some of the gaming space, and also the National Basketball Association, or the NBA, has also participated in the gaming space by building some decentralized apps as well. So to break this down,
Kyle, question: Is Unity or Unreal doing anything in blockchain at this point?
Great question. I don't know in particular. I know that both as a developer platform have been supportive of the technology in gaming, but thus far there's been quite a few gaming platforms that's kind of rised up. I mean, Immutable has created an outstanding platform. Loom Networks, which we're going to talk a little bit about more, they have a huge platform. Dapper Labs. Who else? there's a handful of others, I mean, that are just continuing to output games, but Unreal and Unity, I think, still sit at the core of any gaming startup at this point. But let me take a look at it and report back to everybody. It's a great question as well. Okay, so to dive into some of these new areas, I want to talk a little bit about decentralized finance, or DeFi. If you're monitoring anything in this space, you're following our newsletter, DeFi is something that is going to continue to come around, and if anything, will probably take over the consumer side and have its own landscape eventually as well. And this is more around the future of finance and companies trying to tap into all areas of finance, from regulation to digital banks to helping those that are unbanked. Everything you can imagine about finance, the DeFi space is looking to disrupt in some way, shape, or form. So right now I've called out 10 companies. There are many more that we are currently tracking. And again, decentralized finance crosses over into a lot of the other categories within consumer. Just wanted to make sure that those that are doing something very hardened right now are called out as well. Next is insurance. Insurance is a category that I see as an incredible opportunity area and a very rising very quickly category within the blockchain landscape, open and ripe for disruption, if you will. We've got 4 companies listed here. I already have 12 additional ones, as I know there may be some comments, but there's 12 additional plus companies that we're already tracking in this space that are trying to disrupt, just like decentralized finance, every piece of the value chain when it comes to insurance. B3I is probably one of the more well-known, and they are not just a technology provider or solutions provider, but also I would say a large group of 18 different insurers, some of the largest in the world, who have come together to leverage the technology that B3I and the team put together. Just received investment from China Pacific Insurance, who's a competitor to Ping An Insurance, which is one of the largest insurance companies in China and in Asia as a whole as well. So if you're looking for an opportunity area and you're in the insurance business, there's a spot for you. And then want to jump back into NFTs, or non-fungible tokens. As I said, we were going to blur the lines a little bit from my first slide, but non-fungible tokens, for those who may be new to this term, are used to create for digital assets that are used to create verifiable digital scarcity. Think of something that's very unique, irreplaceable, that is mostly used primarily today for gaming. As I mentioned, Loom Networks is a huge component. This little character in the corner is a Loomy, and thanks to Loom Networks. They have also created a number of tools and suites to support this part of the landscape, including Relentless, which is a trading card game where you can play cards and hold on to those cards forever, and there's a peer-to-peer marketplace. A lot of sports and entertainment areas are looking at this industry very hard, being able to create not just a digital trading card, but also something that has an experience attached to it that's very unique, one-to-one. So my Tom Brady digital NFT is different than Philippe's Tom Brady's digital NFT, where mine may have an experience and his may not, or vice versa as well. So if you're in sports, entertainment, or anything that is attached to experiences and the idea of something like a digital collectible, NFTs is a hot space to look at. And gaming-wise, look at Horizon Blockchain, Immutable, Loom Networks, Dapper, and a handful of others. All right, jumping into enterprise. So now we're top right of the landscape, and somehow, Philippe, consumer and enterprise ended up at the exact amount of companies, so 235 for both. a rarity, I think, from all the landscapes that we've built in the past.
Absolutely.
Dealer's luck. For enterprise, typically, again, this landscape has been dominated by supply chain and logistics, fintech, and in some cases, retail as well. This quarter, we've seen a boom around IoT. We've seen a growth in retail. We've seen the growth in energy and new markets around cannabis, mobility, artificial intelligence, oil and gas as well. This area of the landscape, I'm very excited to see how some of these companies are starting to come together and leveraging the next piece, which is the infrastructure, to support their industries with new solutions and suites. In the IoT sector, we're starting to see the actual or the beginning emergence of blockchain helping to support IoT stand up on its own and really come to the future we all hoped and dreamed it will be. One startup I'll call out, Helium. Helium just recently announced that their nodes, their personal or at-home nodes, which help build a collective network along with crypto mining, we'll just leave that at that, is beginning to roll out, and they're going to be deploying in over 260 different cities around the world, which should help, again, push forward this IoT blockchain industry or category greatly. On the energy side, the US government has gotten involved in the energy sector. A lot of the companies today have actually not just had conversations or pilots, but actually going through deployments in big ways. The US government just put out a trial or a pilot to help protect the national power grid through the Department of Energy. And so Factum, and I believe, I'll have to look up the name, but Factum and one other company are actually working together with the US government to help put together a pilot to secure the national energy grid and start to create microgrids as well. On the retail and supply chain side, we saw IBM re-enter this space, launching their new blockchain network called Trust Your Supplier, which rolls out this month or early last to about 4,000 plus suppliers across North America to help improve the supply chain management of each of these companies as well. And then on the automotive side, Volvo has gotten involved in a big way as they have announced the first electric car, which has been built through recycled cobalt that was mapped on the blockchain. The reason I'm calling some of these out is now it's not just a company says they're doing blockchain, so they get on the landscape or get on the map, but instead they're actually doing hardened things. And the stuff is now in market and coming to life, which is exciting to see after having tracked this for so long. So to call out a few areas, again, oil and gas, one of our new areas. I mentioned the U.S. Department of Energy getting involved here. TFA Labs is the Internet of Things security startup that's going to be working with Factum from the energy side. On the oil and gas side, we do have Shell and another number of other big companies that are doubling down, or in some cases 10x down, jumping into this space, trying to find new solutions or faster solutions to implement blockchain throughout the oil and gas and or energy sector as well. Artificial intelligence is very unique. We've got 4 or 5 now mentioned here, but we also have 10 plus that we're already tracking, including Fetch AI, who's getting into the space, starting to create a metals exchange where they will be not just tracking, but also being able to exchange precious metals and monitor that movement through a decentralized blockchain, AI powered. solution, and that comes later this month. And thank you to Jamie over at Outlier Ventures for sharing that information with me yesterday as well. Bitfury, very notable mining company that we're going to get to shortly, also just launched an AI division. The point of this is that artificial intelligence and IoT in some of these areas like mobility or connected cars, oil and gas, very traditional industries are starting to come together and merge, not just with their new technology being AI and IoT, but also merge in blockchain in very unique ways. One area that will be in the next industry landscape that I've noticed coming out of retail and also supply chain, there's a ton of activity around coffee and recently coconuts, but coffee nonetheless. So food track and trace has been around for many years and something that's probably one of the primary use cases that's talked about around blockchain. But coffee in particular, from farm to cup, has become extremely popular during this last quarter, where we've seen a number of companies start to pop up where they're tracking the traceability of the coffee bean that you're actually drinking out of your cup in the morning. And same with coconuts. Odd combination, but nonetheless. All right, infrastructure. So this is probably the densest part of the entire landscape. There's over 380 plus companies that are listed here and more coming. The team and I ran out of room to fit them all. So there is a lot happening in this space, and very traditionally, this side of the landscape has been dominated by exchanges. It has been dominated by tokens and very traditional pieces of this industry. Whereas now today, coming into Q3 in the second half of the year, we're starting to see the infrastructure landscape really start to take shape and get a little bit more specific around its categories and shape as well. And so when we previously had talked about blockchains, we're now moving from blockchains throughout the technology stack into developer platforms and APIs. We're looking at storage and computing. We're looking at identity and security. We're looking at speed and governance and custody. These are areas that have always been talked about, but now have actual ownership within the landscape and are standing on their own as well. And to dive in a little deeper here, my personal favorite, which I can call out in this landscape since we created it, my personal favorite and most exciting part of this landscape right now is decentralized apps, and we'll get to that in a minute. But I do want to call out how the blockchain categories have started to shift in this landscape. When we first did this, oh my gosh, almost a year ago, the landscape was just, the category was just called blockchains. There wasn't much talk about permissioned versus permissionless, or public versus private, or on-chain versus off-chain versus side chains and interoperable. It was just blockchains. And from there, you got a little bit more specific depending on your use case. Now, as enterprise has really taken to the technology itself has started to harden up. There's been more contributions and more solidified use cases. We've started to see these categories take shape, where now we have the introduction of public blockchains. And these are blockchains that open for anybody. Anybody can participate. There's no single point of control. They're more decentralized. However, there's very little in terms of generalized privacy of transactions. They take high requirements and energy, and also compensation for transactions, which makes it tough to scale and expensive. However, we now have permissioned blockchains, and these permissioned blockchains are private Transactions are limited in visibility. They're less anonymous, which helps with regulations, which is why we see a lot more fintech companies starting to play in this space. And they also scale a little bit better, but they're a little less decentralized and have an increased risk of data manipulation, if you will. But on the public side, we have seen some new blockchains emerge, and particularly most recently, I want to call out Cardero, which I'm totally mispronouncing, so my apologies, guys. Hedera, Orbs, and Flow. So Cardano just recently announced a partnership with New Balance, where they will be working together to help create verification and authenticity for all of the newest shoes and kicks that are coming out of New Balance. So be prepared to see Nike, Adidas is already in this space, but Under Armour and someone like StockX, one of the biggest sneaker exchanges, start to enter this space as well. Hedera in September just launched their public mainnet, so the public blockchain for the development of decentralized applications, and launched with 25 and growing DApps on that network. Orbs has recently been in the news, and they are, it's called a hybrid blockchain. So they actually can do a little bit of private, a little bit of public, and something in between. That's why you see them represented here on both. And then Flow. And Flow was actually created from Dapper Labs out of the lessons learned from building decentralized apps, and how they need to scale, what they need to have in place, and the infrastructure or support services for them to be successful. And so Flow just recently came out. There's a ton of reading on it. So if you go there to test it out, just know it's just recently launched. On the permission side, some of the more notables is R3's Cordera, JP Morgan's Quorum. Quorum is used by, I want to say, 100+ financial institutions who are building, growing, and scaling. Deutsche Bank just joined. That Hyperledger is probably one of the largest used in terms of overall permissioned blockchains. You also have a new up-and-comer, which is Libra. Libra is the Facebook Libra project that was recently announced in June. The Libra blockchain today is permissioned, not necessarily permissionless. So it is a private blockchain that is governed by Facebook, but may, and the Libra Association, but may move as things develop towards a more publicized blockchain as well. And what sits in the middle of these are side chains that work off of these, and also what's called layer 2 solutions that help provide scalability and speed increases to these technology networks, regardless permissioned versus permissionless as well. And again, on the new areas side, we're seeing storage start to rise up. Storage Labs is probably one of the more active companies in storage that you'll be able to find. Compute, we're seeing Definity and a number of others start to rise up in that space to help with distributed computing. And then DApps, decentralized applications. This is the future of applications, and what we are going to see new business models, new markets, new economies, new customers, new everything pop out of. Right now, there's 54 companies. This is already exploding in terms of that number into who we're tracking and what's happening in this space in a dramatic way right now. And if you're looking at decentralized applications, right now we're seeing Ethereum, Tron, and EOS as the 3 main blockchains or networks that these decentralized applications are being built on top of. According to DApp Review, it's important to note who this is coming from. So DApp.review, there's over 3,000 D applications in market with over almost 160,000 active users as of yesterday. That's not a small number. While this industry is growing and consumers are starting to look at these, and enterprise are trying to figure out what and where and how, 160,000 daily active users is a pretty good number for this industry. Ethereum is by far the leader from the infrastructure standpoint of where these applications are being built on. Tron and EOS are neck and neck. However, EOS has probably the most active users with over 100,000 and growing. Top categories that we see are gaming, decentralized finance, and social networks. So if you're looking to enter this space, those are your three categories. If you want to get into some competition, but if not, start to look at everything else below that as entrance points. Also in this category, I want to call Blockstack. Blockstack just recently did a $28 million SEC token offering, the first ever registered, and is growing their suite of tools for developers, along with Liquid Apps, AuraBlock, Dapper Labs, who's the creator of CryptoKitties. All of these are great potential starting points if you're looking to get into the decentralized apps space to begin your journey, whether you're looking for examples, use cases, or tools to just get started. Loom Networks also is another who has not just the tools, but also education. Has a nice little program called Crypto Zombies, well named, that helps you learn how to develop applications on Ethereum from the ground up, which is fun, exciting, and a little bit of entertaining. Telegram is also in this space with the TON network, which will be launching later this month. They've recently launched their code base, but now will be full public version here at the end of October. Samsung, on their latest Samsung phone, launched one of the first DApps stores with 2 apps, not 1, but 2, which is promising, but just the beginning of something more. And then probably the one who's really shattered and brought this category to life was Libra and Facebook. Philippe and I did a ton of research along with the team on Libra, and it potentially being one of the largest DApps or decentralized applications to date, as the construct of what Libra is really offers almost all of the checkboxes for what constitutes as a decentralized application, plus they're able to roll it out to 2 billion people and really tap into not just an application side, but also hits decentralized finance, provide new innovation in a handful of other categories as well. But more on that in just a second. All right, so there was one other area I wanted to cover here.
Hey, Cal, before getting into the ecosystem, there was a few questions. One is government sector. So, I mean, is there any activity there, and what type of activity?
Yes, so there is, and it's actually something we're going to get to in just a few, but okay. It's also trending. Okay, so let me split this in two areas. So yes, there is. It's also trending down in terms of an opportunity area, but there are generalized use cases. So voting, governance, record keeping, etc. So things that you would expect with government that have been talked about. There hasn't been much innovation yet. On the other side, government is getting more involved around this when it comes to finance, when it comes to digital currencies, when it comes to the longer idea of, call it state infrastructure, and how blockchain will play a role in recording all of this information that that we previously saw. So that's the quick version, because I'm about to dive into that here in just a minute. So.
And then the other question is decentralized finance. So what is decentralized finance, and can you give some example?
Oh, absolutely. So jumping back into decentralized finance. So decentralized finance is the idea of, think of a digital bank, or being able to, digital bank is a great example. So no longer having to go into a physical branch location to deposit or exchange or handle anything financially in its simplest form. And instead now anybody can have a bank, anybody can transact, and everybody can buy and sell goods or hold currency. That's in its simplest state. So CeeLo, that's on here, Cake, DeFi are two examples of that. So decentralized finance is the idea of taking something centralized in its simplest form as a bank branch and decentralizing that. And instead, you're able to download a mobile app, for instance, and all of a sudden have a bank account and be able to digitally transact, record those transactions, and monitor everything that you do from a financial perspective. An example that happened just this morning, even though I promised I wouldn't say anything about what's happened today, is the Venezuelan government has just issued, I believe it was crypto debit cards to all of its citizens. We don't need to get into the details of that other than that, but that's a simple example of being able to create a decentralized finance where regardless of if you have a bank account or not, now everybody does by putting something like that in one's hand. Libra, this is their big mission, is providing services to the unbanked, so the 1.7 billion people in the world who don't have access to a bank account, and being able to give them somewhere to store currency in some way, shape, or form. So at its basic, I think that's probably a good way to look at that.
Awesome, thanks.
Yep, and we got to look at the Lumi again. He's a cute little addition to my my landscape. Again, shout out to Loom Networks for letting me use that until they send me an email. So the second half is the blockchain ecosystem, which I want to dive into. And this is, again, the overarching ecosystem, which I and the team think are incredibly important, because while we see all the companies, it's important for an industry that literally changes every 30 seconds to understand who to go to when you do build something, or who to watch when you're looking to co-invest, or where to start if you're building a company, or you're an enterprise and you're looking to who to join to learn from. So in this landscape, we break it into kind of 3 sections: venture, and that includes crowdfunding and hedge funds, to accelerators and incubators, and then consortiums. Consortiums are groups or organizations that collectively come together to either educate, learn in some way with joint use cases or individual use cases, and or build solutions for their particular industry in some way. B3I is a great example. B3I, I mentioned before, is for insurance. There's 18 different insurers, big insurers, who have come together to support each other and build solutions for the insurance company that they can all build and leverage in their own ways. Marco Polo is another financial group similar to Quorum. Marco Polo also has, it's actually built on top of R3, Corda, which is a permissionless, or excuse me, permissioned blockchain that we talked about previously. It's also available on Microsoft Azure. Bank of America is a part of this and just recently joined. Other large institutions and enterprise are there. R3, Mobi, which is focused around mobility. And that has several companies from all different industries, from logistics, supply chain to automotive and beyond. IBM Food Trust, which we've discussed, and then Libra. And Libra, we mentioned here, is the Libra Association. And this is a group of 20 plus or minus different organizations that have come together to focus on the development of Libra, this idea of providing services to the unbanked, and what Libra's future may look like. On the accelerator side, we have seen some new accelerators pop up. So Singularity Net has been added, Mouse Belt, one of the coolest names for an accelerator out of San Francisco, Long Hash in Singapore, Ethereum Classic Labs in San Francisco, and then Starfish Mission also in San Francisco, and a handful of others. On the venture side, Proof of Capital, which was formed by Chris McCann, former Greylock, and Edith Young of former 500 Startups, has come together with a new seed fund for investing into blockchain and cryptocurrency companies. We've also seen Algo Capital, Accomplice, Electric Capital, Skylar Capital, Blue Yard, and ZK Capital, who've been added amongst others. And a shout out to ZK Capital, who provides outstanding white papers and research, which has become leisurely reading for me. So tons of activity. We've seen this last month alone, Everledger raised $20 million in a Series A from a lot of the groups in here, including Tencent, Fidelity. We've seen Immutable, who we mentioned, who raised 15 million from Naspers, Galaxy Digital EOS Fund, Dapper Labs on the DApps side, who's raised just over 11 million as well. So a lot happening in this space. And so that's the overarching ecosystem. To dive into trends in the first half of 2019.
So Kyle, quick question around, so one other point was healthcare, health and healthcare landscape, and then the other one was, studios, Hollywood studios and networks, and then, enterprise. So what are the characteristics of enterprise use case that are best suited for blockchain? And, obviously we can't go over everything in one webinar, but I mean, we are going to do the deep dive in specific industries and specific use case as we are moving the process forward. Now, yep, go ahead.
And I can rapid fire a few of those real quick. I want to show two more slides, and then we'll get to Q&A if that's okay.
Yep. Awesome.
Okay, cool. So first half of 2019, the trends were the same with very little movement. The word patents tripled. Other than that, it was all about infrastructure improvements and more people getting involved in blockchain. And then Q3 hit, and a ton of stuff happened. Blockchain in the enterprise now became a conversation, not just something, but actually happening and commonplace. Public versus permissioned really started to take shape, where people started to pick their allegiance and not just pilot. Infrastructure matured into what's known as the stack, or as Outlier Ventures refers to it as the convergence stack in Web 3.0. DApps, DeFi, and stablecoins all started to make waves thanks to Libra and a few others. Retail got more serious. Blockchain as a service became one click, and education became no longer excuse as a hindrance or a roadblock as to why you may or may not be using this. Over 50+% of the top 50 universities in the world now offer programs around blockchain, up from 42%. 70% of those classes are actually outside of the computer science department. Loom Networks, Blockstack, and hundreds of others are offering education. So if you can't find education, send me an email. Surge of decentralized finance and stablecoins. As I mentioned DeFi earlier, stablecoins is an extremely hot area thanks to Libra and several others, but Libra's loud voice kicked it off this summer, followed by Binance launching a competitor called Venus, CeeLo entering the market, China getting loud and offering their digital currency backed, including Alibaba and Tencent. The IMF has now come out 2 days ago and said something. Tether has now offered a China version. Walmart just patented a stable coin. Wells Fargo has gotten into this. Point is, stable coins and the idea of something that is a digital currency is backed by tangible assets or currencies, something that's digital and that can move around and can be used in many, many different ways as well. So the trends, what's going to happen in the rest of this year, and this is the last slide I'll end on. Well, get ready for things to get more hardened, more specific, business models starting to challenge what we've seen, especially with the rise of decentralized applications, decentralized organizations. Things are going to start to take place. Tokenomics are going to get involved. How people are making money from a digital and a physical sense is going to change going into 2020. Consensus models are going to shift. Enterprise is going to get there. We're going to see more in the healthcare space, and retail is going to take some very, very unique corners and changes. Opportunity areas, here you go. Finance, apps, custody, gaming, health, insurance, social impact are all areas for you to jump into if you're looking to get into this space. And the question around enterprise, we're looking at logistics and supply chain. We're looking at healthcare. There's a few companies that have come together, including Block IQ, which has helped hospitals start using blockchains, 22 to be specific, in Utah. So track and trace, along with data, along with, like I said, logistics and supply chains, and now social impact is starting to rise, and companies getting in that space as well. So if you're looking to get started, and I apologize for the rush, but I want to make sure we have a minute or two for questions. These are areas on the left you should be focusing on. Areas on the right are continually opportunistic areas that are available to start playing with. And I'll pause there.
So digital health is a space that is up and coming.
Very much so. I would argue it's actually going to be on this list for a while. You know, Gardner said it's 5 to 10 years out on this hype cycle, or 10 years plus out. But I think it's ripe to get into right now. You know, we're going to see a little bit in the regulations or ratings space. Morningstar just entered, and they're looking at to start getting into a new rating system around digital assets. So outside of digital health, that's another space. But yeah, I think health is a.
One of the questions is around blockchain and authentication, and in particular blockchain and biometrics. Is there anything happening in that use case?
Let me dive deeper on that, specific around biometrics. You know, around identity and authentication, there's a huge area on the landscape for that. And if anything, digital identity is another focus point going into the second half of the year and into 2020. But let me dive deeper into biometrics for you on that one. So we'll include that in our wrap up.
Awesome. And then plenty of questions. It's 9:59. I mean, the government sector, right? So another example of government sector using blockchain is the Department of Homeland Security and this blockchain to fight cybercrime.
Thank you. That was a mention with the Department of Energy. I forgot to mention that it was in my notes. So yes, that is another example. In around governments, and then also social impact, we're seeing opportunities around agriculture and land rights, climate and environment, to, again, digital identity, government and healthcare. There's some work going around with the Bill and Melinda Gates Foundation around healthcare on that topic as well. So a lot's happening, and unfortunately we couldn't cover it all in 60 minutes.
Yeah, no, thank you so much. As a reminder, Edge Computing World, December 10th to 11th, we're going to talk about DApps, blockchain, and all of that in depth, right? We have like what, a day?
We have an entire day. December 9th will be all focused on this particular spot of the future of decentralization, apps, compute, and business going forward. So December 9th, Computer History Museum, following into Edge Computing World, where we'll be talking about the future of connectivity at the edge and how blockchain, AI, IoT, and all of that play a role in where the world goes.
Yep. So Kyle, thank you very much for this great presentation. The presentation will be available as well as a recording on the site. We're going to send you, for everybody who participated or registered, we're going to send you an email to have access to that information. So no worries there if you missed anything. And we'll go back to your question and make sure we answer them as well. So thank you very much for this webinar, for your attendance, and we'll see you, we'll talk to you next week. Take care.
Thanks, everybody.